giving an update on last week's deadly attack on the police officers in Dallas. Dallas Police Chief David Brown yesterday spoke on the current state of policing in America. He said politicians have to do their jobs just as law enforcement has to do theirs.
Every societal failure, we put it off on the cops to solve. Not enough mental health funding. Let the cop handle it. Not enough drug addiction funding. Let's give it to the cops. Here in Dallas, we got a loose dog problem. Let's have the cops chase loose dogs. Schools fail. Give it to the cops. 70% of the African community is being raised by single women. Let's give it to the cops to solve that as well. That's too much to ask. Policing was never meant to solve all those problems.
Here to discuss it is Alex Del Carmen, Executive Director of the School of Criminology, Criminal Justice, and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State University in Texas. Good morning to Alex. Thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, is he right?
So being a police officer is an extremely difficult job, and perhaps it's one of the most difficult jobs out there. So some of the points that Chief Brown made is spot on.
Yeah, we've talked to some other folks in law enforcement today and say that, you know, in some ways it's a failure of government. In one specifically talked about mental health issues. You know, when we defunded a lot of the mental health facilities where people were placed, we put them out into the streets, and who had to deal with them and try to make sense of it was the police officer.
Right. So if you think about the process of what makes a person a police officer, and you think about
Oops, I think we're having trouble with Alex Del Carmen's phone there for a second. We'll see if we can't get it back.
So if you think about what the process of becoming a police officer is, an incredibly difficult process to create an officer.
Right. Now, it's got to be, and the chief also talked about something else, Alex. It's got to be at the forefront of this, too. The average police officer in Dallas makes $40,000 a year and has to be skilled in all of these areas and put his life in danger all the time, too. Is that what we can expect for a police officer in large cities in America, that kind of pay?
Unfortunately, it's been a trend as opposed to the exception. City councils are pressing constantly chiefs of police about their reduced budget, about their inability to pay individuals more money. And I think Chief Brown, one of the great things that he did yesterday in being very candid with the public is he's raising all of these points of conversation across the United States, because being a police officer is one of the hardest jobs in the world, one of the most underpaid jobs in the world, and the least appreciated of them all.
Yeah. Alex, there's something else that we promised we would do regularly on this air, and that is to give the facts about statistics concerning police officers, African Americans, and other ethnic groups across the country. And there's a study out today that says that, and it was counterintuitive, I think, to a lot of people, that force is used against African Americans less, deadly force less than it is against other minorities and white citizens as well. Were you surprised by this?
I'm not surprised by it if you count the number of instances where deadly force is used. But I think the point that perhaps, I haven't read the study yet, but perhaps the point that some people ignore is the proportionality of the use of force incidents against minorities, meaning that in terms of frequency, Caucasians are probably the subject of the most deadly force incidents by police. However, when it comes to the actual proportion, the percentage of minorities being the subject to that, I would tend to guess that minorities are proportionally at a higher level than their majority counterparts.
Well, this ironically gave percentages as far as they did it that way. It was a Harvard study done by a very respected financial guy, and basically it's claiming that even including the percentages that involve, there are fewer fatal incidents with police and African Americans than there are in others. And there's many examples of it. I encourage you to go look at this study. It's very fascinating. But the other element to it, and because the other side of the coin is this, non-lethal force was used more against African Americans, the use of hands pushed into a wall, use of batons, et cetera, than it was against white Americans. So there's two sides of this coin.
Yeah, there are actually multiple sides to the story, and I would venture to say that one of the things that perhaps we need to start asking is not whether or not lethal force versus non-lethal force was used, but rather if the person actually deserved
Right.
would be the subject of that.
Yeah.
And so that takes us into the reasons as to why the officer would have done that.
Right. Alex, it's an excellent point, and we'll continue to bring these points out because I think that the public needs to know it, and that's part of what the responsibility of the media should be. Alex Del Carmen is the Executive Director of the School of Criminology, Criminal Justice, and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State University in Texas. Thanks, Alex. Good talking to you again.
Thank you for having me.